Yeah. You know those moments when you got your oatmeal, right? And this had oatmeal. And you sit it down on the table and it goes all over your computer. You know what I'm talking about? So that's why I'm late. Anyway, here we are. So this is the Eye of Argon. Let me jump to the book to show you the. I think this is where I'm going to start. Page 10. Yeah, so this is the PDF. Whoosh. The Eye of Argon. It's by Jim Theus. It's touted as the worst fantasy book, short story that there is. I think it's awesome. We'll see what you think. I've been trying to do some voices and such with it, just impromptu. I've never read the thing before, so we'll see how that goes. All right. Oh, brief synopsis of what happened previous to now. So you can see the part 1 video, which is somewhere on the channel. And I'm going to go over it right now. A little bit of a recap. So the main character is this dude, Grigner, which I don't know how to pronounce. And he's essentially Conan the Barbarian. Like huge, flaming red hair. And all he likes to do is, bed winches and drink and then kill people. And that's it. And he goes apparently from place to place, doing this, getting run off, and trying to avoid getting captured. I think this book, Jim Theus is seriously into some adjective use and adverbs, like maybe a little too much. Okay, that's pretty much what's happened. You see, kind of strolling through. He's attacked by these soldiers. He doesn't attack. What does he do? One messes with him because I don't know. He just does, and so Grigner kills him. And then the soldiers' buddies come and bang him on the head and drag him off. And then he's talking to this noble guy who's like, we're gonna put you on the tree of woe, basically. And for some reason, then Grigner kind of, decides, very calculating wise, that he can't take the guards that he's surrounded by, and that's where we are. There was a flashback where he was in some other, Khazad Doom style place and ran off. All right, so let me roll back a little bit. See, there's the guy that's giving him the sentence. Okay. So, right. So you have the Eminence, who is kind of like the noble dude. He's this fat dude. And then you have his advisor, who tells him to not just kill Grigner, instead to basically torture him by putting him in like a mine or something. And that's what this is about. Okay, let me see if I can find this. All right, so he says, Eminence, the punishment you've decreed will cause much misery to this scum, yet it will last only a short time. Then release him to a land beyond the sufferings of the human body. Why not mellow him in one of our subterranean vaults for a few days, then send him to life labor in one of your buried mines? To one such as he, a life spent in the confinement of the Stygian pits will be an infinitely more appropriate and lasting torture. The noble cupped his drooping double chin in the folds of his briming palm. Meditating for a moment upon the rationality of the counselor's words. Then raised his shaggy brown eyebrows and turned toward the advisor, eyes aglow. As always, Agafendigum, you speak with great wisdom. Your words ring of great knowledge concerning the nature of one such as he, saith the king. The noble turned toward the prisoner with a noticeable shimmer reflecting in his frog-like eyes, and his lips contorting to a greasy grin. I have decided to void my previous decree. The prisoner shall be removed to one of the palace's underground vaults. There he shall stay until I have decided that he is sufficiently simmered, whereupon he is to be allowed to spend the remainder of his days at labor in one of my mines. Upon hearing this, Grignar realized that his fate would be far less merciful than death to one such as he, who is used to roaming the countryside at will. A life of confinement would be more than his body and mind could stand up to. This type of life would be immeasurably worse than death. I shall never understand the ways of your twisted civilization if I simply defend my honor and am condemned to life confinement by a pig who sits on his royal ass wooing whores and knowing nothing of the affairs of their land he imagines to rule, lectures Grignar. Enough of this. Away with the slut before I lose my control. This guy. Seeing the peril of his position, searched for an opening. Crushing prudence to the sward, he plowed into the soldier at his left arm, taking hold of his sword, and bounding to the dais, supporting the prince before the startled guards could regain their composure. Agathindeme leaped and his sire, but found a sword blade permeating the length of his ribs before he could loose his weapon. The counselor slumped to his knees. Slid his crimsoned blade from Afghan rib's cage. The fat prince stood undulating in insurmountable fear before the edge of the fiery maned comet, his flabs of jellied blubber pulsating to and fro in ripples of flowing terror. Where is your wisdom and power now, Majesty? Growled Grignar. The prince went rigid as Grignar discerned him with glazing over his shoulder. What? It's a little weird, erotic. I don't know. And written well. The prince went rigid as Grignar discerned him glazing over his shoulder. Oh, glazing over his shoulder, right. I see. He swiveled to note the cause of the noble's attention, raised his sword over his head, and prepared to leash, right? Leash. Not unleash. Leash a vicious downward cleft, but fell short as the haft of a steel-rimmed pike clashed against his unguarded skull. Then blackness and solitude. Silence, enshrouding, and ever-peaceful reigned supreme. All right. Before me, Sirrah, before me as always. Nobly cackled. Consciousness returned to Grignar in stygimatic pools as his mind gradually cleared of the cobwebs cluttering its inner recesses. Yet the Stygian cloud of charcoal ebony remained, an incompatible shield of blackness, enhanced by the bleak absence of sound. Grignor's muddled brain reeled from the shock of the blow he had received to the base of his skull. The events leading to his predicament were slow to filter back to him. He dickered. What the fuck? He dickered with the notion that he was dead and had descended or sunk, however it may be, to the shadowed land beyond the aperture of the grave, but rejected this hypothesis when his memories sifted back within his grasps. This was not the land of the dead. It was something infinitely more precarious than anything the grave could offer. Death promised an infinity of peace, not the finite misery of an inactive life of confined torture, forever concealed from the life-bearing shafts of the beloved rising sun. The orb that had been before taken for granted, yet now cherished above all else. To be forever refused further glimpses of the snow-capped summits of the land of his birth. Never again to witness the thrill of plundering Never again to witness the thrill of plundering unexplored lands beyond the crest of a bleeding horizon. And perhaps, worst of all, the denial to ever again encompass the lustful excitement of caressing the naked curves of the body of a trim, yound wench. This was indeed one of the buried chasms of hell, concealed within the inner depths of the palace's despised interior. A fearful ebony chamber, devised to drive to the brinks of insanity the minds of the unfortunately condemned, through the inapt solitude of a limbo of listless, dreary silence. 3.5. There's a 3.5. All right. A tightly wrung, elliptical circle. What? A tightly wrung, elliptical circle of torches cast their wavering shafts, prancing morbidly over the smooth surface of a rectangular ridged altar. Okay. Expertly chiseled forms of grotesque gargoyles graced the oblique rim, protubrating the length of the grim orifice of death. Staring forever ahead into nothingness, in complete ignorance of the bloody rites enacted in their presence. Brown, flaking stains decorated the golden surface of the ridge surrounding the altar, which banked to a small slit at the lower right-hand corner of the altar. The slit stood above a crudely pounded pail, which had several silver mesh chalices hanging at its sides, dangling at the rim of golden mallet, the handle of which was engraved with images of twisted faces and groved at its far end with slots designed for a snug hand grip. The head of the mallet The head of the mallet was slightly larger than a clenched fist and shaped into a smooth oval mass. Encircling the marble altar was a congregation of leering shaman. Eerie chants of a bygone age, originating unknown eons before the memory of man, were being uttered from the buried recesses of the acolytes' deeplings. Orange paint was smeared in generous globules over the tops of the priestesses' wrinkled, shaven scalps. Kind of reminds me of a certain movie. While golden rings projected from the lobes of their pink ears. Ornate robes of the lustrous purple satin enclosed their bulging torsos. Why are they all fat? Attached around their waists with with silvered silk lashes, latched with ebony buckles in the shape of morose, misshaped skulls. Okay? Just imagine dressing for that. Dangling around their necks were oval-fashioned medallions held by thin gold chains, featuring in their centers blood-red rupees, which resembled crimson fetish eyeballs. Cushioning their bare feet were plush red felt slippers with pointed golden spikes projecting from their tips. What the fuck? Situated in front of the altar and directly adjacent to the copper pail was a massive jade idol, a misshaped, hideous bust of the shaman's pagan deity. The shimmering green idol was placed in a sitting posture on an ornately carved golden throne raised upon a round, vori-plated dais. It bulging arms and webbed hands resting on the padded arms of the seat. Its head was entwined in golden snake-like coils hanging over its oblong ears, which tapered off to thin, hollow points. Its nose was a bulging triangular mass, sunken in at both sides, with toe-gaping nostrils. Dramatic. Beneath the nostrils was a twisted, shaggy-lipped mouth, giving the impression of a slavering, sadistic grimace. At the foot of the heathen deity, a slender, pale-faced female, naked but for a jewel, a golden, jeweled harness enshrouding her huge, outcropping breasts, supporting long, silver laces, which extended to her thigh, stood before the pearl-white field, with noticeable shivers traveling up and down the length of her exquisitely molded body. Her delicate lips trembled beneath soft, narrow hands as she attempted to conceal herself from the piercing stare of the ambivalent idol. Okay. Glaring directly down towards her was the stony, cycloptic face of the bloated deity. Gaping from its single oblong socket was scintillating, many-faceted scarlet emerald, a brilliant gem seeming to possess a life all of its own, a priceless, gleaming stone capable of domineering the wealth of conquering empires. The Eye of Argon. Ooh, hold on. The Eye of Argon. It was a little sharp. It's my bad. Yeah? I can't play this thing. The Eye of Argon. All right, the Bowen has gone away. Number 4. I'm going to blow my nose for this. All right. Okay. All knowledge of measuring time had escaped Grignor. When a person is deprived of the sun, moon, and stars, he loses all conception of time as he had previously understood it. It seemed as if years had passed, if time were being measured by terms of misery and mental anguish. Yet he estimated that his stay had only been a few days in length. What a pussy. He had slept, not that it's a bad thing to be a pussy, and what a dick. He has slept, what? He has slept 3 times. He has slept 3 times and had been fed 5 times since his awakening in the crypt. However, when the actions of his body are restricted, its needs are also affected. The need for nourishment, and slumber are directly proportional. Okay, graph really quick here. Okay, yeah, got this, yeah. Got your x-axis, got your y-axis, yeah, like this. So, let me get this. The needs of nourishment and slumber, there, are directly proportional to the functions the body has performed. So, functions, boop. Yeah? Okay. It's true, I guess. The need for nourishment and slumber are directly proportional to the functions the body has performed, meaning that when free and active, may become hungry every 6 hours and witness the desire for sleep every 15 hours. Whereas in his present condition, he may encounter the need for food every 10 hours, and the want for rest every 20 hours. Give or take. All methods he had before depended upon were extinct in the dismal pit. Hence, he may have been imprisoned for 10 minutes or 10 years. He did not know, resulting in a disheartened emotion deep within his being. The food, if you can honor the moldering lumps of fetid mush to that extent, was borne to him by 2 guards who by 2 guards who opened a portal at the top of his enclosure and shoved it to him in wooden bowls, retrieving the food and water bowels from his previous meal at the same time, after which they threw back the bolts of the iron latch and returned to their other duties, whatever they may be. Since deprived of all other means of nourishment, Grignor was impelled to eat the tainted slop in order to ward off the pangs of starvation. Though, as he stuffed it into his mouth with his filthy fingers, nasty fingers, and struggled to force it down his throat, punish that throat, he imagined it was that which had been spurned by the hounds stationed at various segments of the palace. I have no idea what that means. There was little in the Byron vault that could occupy his body or mind. He had paced out the length and width of the enclosure time and time again, every 10 minutes, and tested every granite slab which consisted the walls of the prison, in hopes of finding a hidden passage to freedom, all of which was to no avail other than to keep him busy and distract his mind from wandering to thoughts of what he believed was his future. He had memorized the number of strides from one end to the other of the cell, and knew the exact number of slabs which made up the bleak dungeon. All in 10 minutes. and in total blackness. New Moras schemes were introduced and alternately discarded, in turn as they succored to unravel to him no means of escape which stood the slightest chance of success. Of success. Anguish continued to mount as his means of occupation were rapidly exhausted. Suddenly, with no tithe, he was routed from his contemplations as he detected a faint scratching sound at the end of the crypt opposite him. The sound seemed to be caused by something trying to scrape away at the granite blocks the floor of the enclosure consisted of. The sandy scratching of something like an animal's claws. Gradually groped his way to the other end of the vault, carefully feeling his way along with his hands ahead of him. When a few inches from the wall, a loud, penetrating squeal, whee! And the scampering of small padded feet reverberated from the walls of the roughly hewn chamber. How can it be slick and roughly Grigner threw his hands up to shield his face and flung himself backwards upon his buttocks. A fuzzy form bounded to his hairy chest. What the? Burying its talons in his flesh while gnashing toward his throat with its grinding white teeth, its sour, fetid breath scorching the squirming barbarian's dilating nostrils. Grappled with the lashing flexor muscles of the repugnant body of a gargantuan brown-hided rat, striving to hold its razor teeth from his juicy jugular. As its beady gray organs of sight glazed into the flaring emeralds of its prey. It's an ROUS. Taking hold of the Rogan, taking hold of the rodent around its lean, growling stomach. With both hands, Grignorabe pried it from his crimson rent breast, removing small patches of flayed flesh from his chest in the motion between the squalid black claws of the starving beast. Holding the rodent at arm's length, he cupped his right hand over its frothing face, constricting his fingers into a vice-like fist over the quivering head. Retaining his grips on the rat, flexed his outstretched arms while slowly twisting his right hand clockwise and his left hand counterclockwise motion. The rodent let out a tortured squall, drawing scarlet as it violently dug its foam-flecked fangs into the barbarian's sweating palm, causing his face to contort to an ugly grimace as he cursed beneath his broeth. With a loud crack, boom! It's not really a crack. With a loud crack, crack! The rodent's head parted from its squirming torso, sending out a sprinkling shower of crimson gore, and trailing a slimy string of disjointed vertebrae, snapped trachea, esophagus, and jugular. Disjointed hyoid bone, morose purple stretched hide, and blood-seared muscles. Nothing else? Flinging the broken body to the floor, Grignor shook his blood-streaked hands and wiped them against his thigh until dry, then wiped the blood that had showered his face and from his eyes. Again sitting himself upon the jagged floor, he prepared to once more revamp his glum meditations. Wait, where'd the rat come from? He told himself that as long as he still breathed the gust of life through his lungs, hope was not lost. He told himself this, but found it hard to comprehend in his gloomy surroundings. Yet, he was still alive, his bulging sinews at their peak of marvel, his struggling mind floating in a mirror of impressed excellence of thought. Plot after plot sifted through his mind in energetic contemplations. Then it hit him. Minutes may have passed in silent thought, or days. He could not tell, but he stumbled at last upon a plan that he considered as holding a slight margin of plausibility. He might die in the attempt, but he knew he would not submit without a final, bloody struggle. It was not a foolproof plan, no. Yet it built up a store of renewed vortexed energy in his overwrought soul. Though he might perish in the execution of the escape, he would still be escaping the life of infinite torture in store for him. Either way, he would still cheat the gloating prince of the succored revenge his sadistic mind craved so dearly. Whew. Man. Get some bubbly water for this. The guards would soon come to bear him off to the prince's buried mines of dread. Speaking of dread, the DreadLore Kickstarter just dropped today. I'll put the link in the chat. You should go get on that tabletop RPG. It's pretty good. I made it. Where's my boobly water? It said dread. It's not my fault. I gotta do, senseless and shameless is what I'm thinking of. Shameless plugs. Maybe reading this book is not a great idea. All right. Oh, it's so bougie. The guards would soon come to bear him off to the prince's buried mines of dread, giving him the sought-after opportunity to execute his newly formulated plan. Groping his way along the rough floor, finally found his tool. In a pool of congealed gore, the carcass of the decapitated rodent, the tool that the very filth had been sentenced to, spawned. What? Okay, hold on. Groping his way along the rough floor, Grignabaigorebe finally found his tool in a pool of congealed gore. The carcass of the decapitated rodent. The tool that the very filth he had been sentenced to spawned. When the time came for action, he would have to be prepared, so he set himself to rending the sticky hulk in grim silence, searching by the touch of his fingertips for the lever to freedom. Okay, I see where he's going with this. 5. Right. Up to the altar and be done with it, wench, ordered a fidgeting shaman, as he gave the female a grim stare, accompanied by the wrinkling of his lips, to a mirthful grin of delight. The girl burst into a slow, steady whimper, stooping shakily to her knees and cringing woefully from the priest, with both arms wound snake-like around the bulging jade shin rising before her scantily attired figure. Her face was redly inflamed from the salty flow of tears spouting from her glassy, dilated eyeballs. With short, heavy footfalls, the priest... with short, heavy footfalls, the priest approached the female. His piercing stare never wavering from her quivering young countenance. Halting before the terrified girl, he projected his arm outward and motioned her to arise with an upward movement of his hand. The girl's... That's not capitalized. The girl's whimpering increased slightly as she sunk closer to the floor rather than arising. It doesn't work. The flickering torches outlining her trim build with a weird... What? The flickering torches outlined her trim build with a weird, ornate glow as it cast a ghostly shadow dancing in horrid waves of splendor over smoothly worn whiteness of the marble-hewn altar. And here's a check its privilege. The shaman's lips curled back further, exposing a set of blackened, decaying molars. God, how far did his lips go back? Decaying molars, which transformed into his slovenly grin into a wide, greasy arc with a sadistic mirth and alternating interposed into the female a strong sensation of stomach-curdling nausea. Have it as you will, female, gloated the enhanced priest as he bent over at the waist, projecting his ape-like arms forward and grasped the female's slender arms with his hairy round fists. With an inward surge of his biceps, he harshly jerked the trembling girl to her feet and smothered her salty, wet cheeks with the moldy touch of his decrepit. Oh. With an inward surge of his biceps, he harshly jerked the trembling girl to her feet and smothered her salty, wet cheeks with the moldy touch of his decrepit, dull, red lips. The vile stench of the shaman's hot, fetid breath overcame the nauseated female with a deep soul-searing sickness, causing her to wrench her head backwards and regurgitate a slimy, orange-white stream of swelling gore over the richly woven purple robe of the enthused acolyte. Had she eaten like a bunch of like Flintstones push-up pops? What? Why is it orange-white? Huh. The priest's lips trembled with a malicious rage as he removed his callous paws from the girl's arms and replaced them with tightly around her undulating neck, shaking her violently to and fro. Ah! The girl gasped a tortured groan from her clamped lungs, her sea blue eyes bulging forth from damp sockets. Cocking her right foot backwards, she leashed it. She didn't unleash it. She leashed it desperately outwards, with the strength of a demon possessed, lodging her sandaled foot squarely between the shaman's testicles. She split the testes. The startled priest released his crushing grip, crimping his body over at the waist, overlooking his recessed belly. Wide open in a deep chasm. Wide open in a deep Kazim. Wait, did she actually break his balls? His face flushed to a rose-red shade of crimson. Eyelids fluttering wide, with eyeballs protruding blindly outwards from their sockets to their outmost perimeters, while his lips quivered wildly about allowing an agonized wallow to gust forth as his breath billowed from burning lungs. His hands reached out, clutching his urinary gland. He found it. As his knees wobbled rapidly about for a few seconds, then buckled, causing the ruptured shaman to collapse in an egg-huddled mass to the granite pavement, rolling helplessly about in his agony. Goddamn! If you're gonna kick someone in the balls, that is how you do it. Demon-possessed kick. The pathetic screeches of the shaman groveling in dejected misery upon the hand-hewn granite-laid pavement, worn smooth by countless hours of arduous sweat and toil, a welter of ichor oozing through his clenched hands. Oh shit! Attracted the perturbed attention of his comrades from their foetid ulations. So she actually straight up, like, burst his ball sack. Whoa. Okay. All right. The actions of this rebellious wench bespoke the credence of an unheard of sacrilege. Never before in a lost maze of untold eons had a chosen one dared to demonstrate such blasphemy in the face of the cult's idolic deity. The girl cowered in unreasoning terror, helpless in the face of the emblazoned acolyte's rage. She just burst the dude's fucking balls. What are you talking about? Her orchid tussled face smothered betwixt her bulging bosom as she shut her curled lashed and tightly hoping... Okay. Her orchid-tussled face smothered betwixt her bulging bosom. Those are some big old titties, man. Betwixt her bulging bosom, as she shut her curled lashed, tightly hoping to open them and find herself awakening from a morbid nightmare. Like open her boobs? What? I'm moving on. Yet the hand of destiny decreed her no such mercy. The antagonized pack of leering shaman converging tensely upon her prostrate form were entangled all too lividly in the grim web of reality. What does that mean? Shuddering from the clammy touch of the shaman as they grappled with her supple form, hands wrenching at her slender arms and legs in all directions, her bare body being molested in the midst of a labyrinth of orange smudges, purple satin, and mangled skulls, shadowed in an eerie crimson glow. Her confused head reeled, then clouded in a mist of enshrouding ebony as she lapsed beneath the protective sheet of unconsciousness to a land peach and resign. Oh my God. All right, we're going to do another page. Hey, bruh. Take hold of this rope, said the first soldier. Wait, hold on. I need a good one. Hold on. Take hold of this rope, said the first soldier, and climb out from your pit, and slut. Your presence is requested in another far deeper hellhole. Can you hold my beer? Grigner slipped his right hand to his thigh, concealing a small, opaque object beneath the folds of the G-string wrapped about his waist. Brine wells swelled in Grigner's cold, jade, squinting eyes, which, grown accustomed to the gloom of the Stygian pools of ebony engulfing him, were bedazzled and blinded by a flickering radiance cast forth by the second soldier's resin torch. Tightly gripped in the second soldier's right hand, opposite the intermittent torch, was a large, double-edged axe. A long, leather-wound oaken handled, transfixing the center of the weapon's iron head. Ooh. Adorning the torsos of both of the sentries were thin, yet sturdy hauberks, the breastplates of which were woven of tightly hemmed twines of reinforced silver braiding. Cupping the soldiers' feet, their feet were thick leather sandals, wound about their shins to 2 inches below their knees. Wrapped about their waists were wide satin girdles with slender bladed poniards dangling loosely from them, the hilts of which featured scarlet-encrusted gems. Resting upon the manes of their heads, and reaching midway to their brows, were smooth copper morions. Morons. Spiraling the lower portion of the helmet were short, up-curved silver spikes, while a golden hump spired from the top of each bassinet. Beneath their chins, wound around their necks, and draping their clad shoulders dangled regal purple satin cloaks, which flowed midway to the soldiers' feet. Okay. Hand over hand, feet braced against the dank walls of the enclosure, huge Grigner ascended from the moldering depths of the forlorn abyss. His swelled limbs, stiff, due to the boredom of a timeless inactivity, compounded by the musty atmosphere and jagged granite protuberant against his body, craved for action. The opportunity now presenting itself served the purpose of oiling his rusty joints and honing his dulled senses. He braced himself, facing the second soldier. The sentry's stature was wildly exaggerated in the glare of the flickering crescent cuppix in his right fist. His eyes were wide open in a slightly slanted, owlish gaze, enhanced in their sinister intensity by the hawk-bill curve of his nose and pale yellow peak of his cheeks. Can I do more? Place your hands behind your back, said the second soldier as he raised his axe over his right shoulder blade and cast it a wavering glance. We might bind your wrists to parry any attempts at escape. Be sure to make the knot a stout one, Brug. We wouldn't want our guests to leave our guidance. Brig grasped Grigner's left wrist and reached for the barbarian's right wrist. Grignabride wrenched his right arm free and swiveled to face Brig. Reach beneath his loincloth with his right hand, and the sentry grappled at his girdle for the sheathed dagger, but recoiled short of his attentions at Grigner's right arm swept to his gorge. The soldier went limp, his bobbing eyes rolling beneath fluttering eyelids, a deep welt across his spouting gullet. Without lingering to observe the result of his efforts, Grignabraizguaibe dropped to his knees. The second soldier's axe cleft over Grignabrai's head in a buzz of silvered ferocity, severing several scarlet locks from his scalp. Whoosh! Coming to rest in his fellow's stomach. Ooh! The iron head crashed through mail and flesh with splintering force, spilling a pool of crimson entrails over the granite paving. And that, my dears, will be where we end today. We're on page 22, middle. Grigner is about to escape. So, hope you guys dug my reading of the Eye of Argon, part 2. There will certainly be a part 3, possibly a part 4. Yeah, hope you can make it next time. Jump on over to the DreadLore Kickstarter, if you will, and give me money.